Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome to Achieve Anything Now. We are in the advanced course. This is number 7 of 8. We are in the home stretch. Thank you, everybody, for showing up again this evening. And once again, I do apologize for the late invite, but let's just go ahead and charge right forward. So remember real quick how the course is set up. We're going to do a quick review here of some of the tools and the things that we learned. We're going to quick Q&A, and then we're going to go into the Prometheus induction this evening, and we're going to go into a little bit more of the advanced dichotomies. So remember the outcome of this course. People go to the big seminars, and then you get the coaching, and this course is specifically outcome oriented for developing self-awareness in the emotional release strategies so that you can face the mental and emotional head junk and the emotional problems of everyday life. And of course, we use it on the 2 fundamental premises, which is everybody has a psychological blueprint, which is very similar to their money blueprint. Assets minus bills equals cash. We also have our motivation minus our head trash equals our results, right? Or our efforts and our energy. So we want to switch that around and release. So little bit of Q&A from last week. A couple great questions and distinctions. Somebody wrote in with the emails and they said, hey, how long does it take for something to manifest? Well, I like to say this, besides it depends, or everything is different. It's going to take about as long as you need for you to release the resistance that's preventing you from getting to the level of consciousness that your goal is at, and for you to take the congruent actions necessary for growth. So I like to look at it like this real quick. If you're here and what you want is over here, we have to go through all the processes of releasing all the stuff between now and then so that we can get to here as fast as possible. And remember that between here and here, what you're emotionally focused on, empowering or disempowering the majority of the time, is what's going to end up being here and what's going to end up as the result. So just because you're releasing stuff to go from here to here, if you still have negative self-talk, negative questions, and you're talking to yourself saying, hey, this is what I don't want to have happen anymore, you're going to get what you don't want to have happen, because that's the end picture that you're putting there. So we want to focus on saying it the way that you want it to be and clearing out all the negative stuff, so the majority of the time we can be positive and focused towards what it is that we want to have. So another great question is, what's the purpose for visualizing the light in my head? So the light is what we use. Visually, it represents energy, universal oneness, God, love, however you choose to define it, right? It's the Force, Luke. That's what the light represents, bringing light to the darkness. It ebbs and flows. It gives the conscious mind something to focus on while we meditate. And when we make a suggestion like let that infinite source of love and healing energy come in through the top of your head, as a white light, yellow light, however you choose to see it, it's easy because people can be visual, kinesthetic, which is feeling, or auditory. And so it just helps with the process of ultimately collapsing the dichotomy between the conscious and the unconscious mind with a visual representation. So it's one of the most standard representations of love, and that's why I told you, like Roman Catholic, all the saints have the halo, the energy above the top of their head, right? It just represents light. So that's all I can tell you about that. So I want to tell you 2 other quick questions that came in that I didn't have right here. The first one is, when it comes to limiting decisions, what if I'm clearing up the same stuff over and over, and what do I use? So personally, I always like to go back to the root cause. So if I had a limiting belief like, I can't do this, or I don't know how, remember that limiting decisions start with I can't, I don't, I'm not, I should, I could, I need to, I ought to, I have to. If this happens, then I'll do this. When this happens, then I'll do that. But, although, however, whenever I get, let's just take a quick example, like I don't know how to do this. I think of timeline. So go back to timeline, limiting decisions, or you can go back to the other one, the single event. But I actually nowadays just take the limiting decision off of the end. So if I said something like, I don't know how to do this, I would just tell my unconscious mind, right, Jimmy inside, I would just say, hey, little Jimmy, just go back to the very first time, the very first event you even had the awareness of, I don't know how, or I don't, right? And so I basically just take the specific limiting belief off the end, and I just go back and clear up I don't, or I can't, or I should. When was the very first time I had the very first awareness of even thinking what I should do based on somebody else or scarcity or whatever, right? Because something turned out negative. So I just go back and say, release the earliest known event that we ever said I should in relationship to this or that, or just go back and clear up the earliest moment I ever thought I should, because that limits me. So
that's
go ahead.
I don't know. Maybe I'm muted.
I forgot to unmute everybody. Go ahead. Or mute everybody. Go ahead.
So that's the dialogue you have with your subconscious mind. You actually go into the meditation space of breathing and then go into that dialogue?
Yep. I just added in. Yep. So I just added in.
That's great.
I can't, or I shouldn't, or I'm not.
So you're trying to pull the root out, basically.
Always try to go back to the very first event, the root event, which when disconnected will allow you to let go or release that limiting decision, the emotion, whatever it is. And you'll get the hang of that after a while if you start to look for it and listen to it. What's the very first event, the root event that when disconnected will allow you to let go of all of it? Okay?
Yeah, great.
I'll put it in the slide for next week so you can do that. So I had one other gentleman come back that was in the very first class, and he said, hey, look, I think this works kind of, I'm really challenged with it. I don't know that's really serving me. And I said, really, what's going on? He's like, well, for me, sometimes I don't think it's okay for me just to release this stuff without knowing why or what it's there for. So two key distinctions for that. This gentleman is very much an auditory processor. So he talks through his things intellectually a lot, kind of consciously and unconsciously. So I want to say two quick points on that. The first one is, I do make a suggestion sometimes, or say, what's the very first event, the root event, which when disconnected will allow you to do this? Or I say, what is there to learn from that? The learnings of which will allow you to let go of this emotion easily and effortlessly. And it may come to you consciously or unconsciously. That's in the timeline work, where the specific language is, what is there to learn from that? The learning of its related of these emotions easily and effortlessly, and they may come to you consciously or unconsciously. That's okay. What is there to learn from this? Allow you to let that go. Sometimes if it's a kinesthetic thing, the person just feels it leave, and they don't necessarily need to consciously know what the learning is. They just know that it's gone and trust their unconscious mind to go ahead and let it go. If you feel like you really want to know and understand what the process is, the second distinction I would have is this, which is actually two. The first one would be to tell your unconscious mind, I want to know what this is consciously, so let's let this go. The second distinction would come in how you're doing the release work. If you're doing the release work and you're sitting in your chair and you're falling asleep all the time, your unconscious mind is probably just clearing this stuff up while you sleep. And it's great to say, hey, and if I fall asleep, just go ahead and continue to clear this stuff up while I fall asleep. And it's totally okay for me to not know, but just keep doing it anyway. If you want to know and have the experiences of what your unconscious mind is bringing up as a representation of the events and doing all of that, then I would recommend you do a little bit more of what I do on the weekends, which is in a very safe place, not while you're driving. I know I said not, so stay away from that thought, but go for a walk or do something where you can be in that light meditative state as you go, so your unconscious mind and your conscious mind are like right on the edge there between conscious and unconscious, like when you step in the elevator, right? And you kind of zone out looking at the letters going 1, 2, 3, 4, and you step out on the wrong floor anyway. go for a walk or do something there where you can still consciously have the experience of doing the work. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So let's charge forward. So right to the end of the question, Jeff. So let's do a quick timeline review. Remember, everybody has their timeline from the past and the present and the future, and it's through time, and which is through your head, right? And in time is in the moment, in your head. Your timeline goes through your head, or through time, where you move through time sequentially, usually out like this somewhere. And we have some great timeline techniques because timeline lets you blow out all your gestalts. And last time we did, clearing up anxiety, where you go out past the successful completion of an event. And we talked about the imprint phase, the modeling phase, the socialization phase. And the question is, what's the very first event, the root event, which when disconnected will allow you to let go of those emotions, that limiting decision? If you were to know, was it before, during, or after your birth? Right? If it was after, we say what year. If it was during your birth, say great, what month. If it was before, we say great, was a past life or handed down to you genealogical? And oh, by the way, how many past lives, how many generations ago, right? And the key of timeline work, the reason why it accelerates everything is because it blows out the entire gestalt, right? And then, of course, the last thing we talked about last week was putting the goal in your future, float up above now, change the picture to black and white, move into it, go out in the future. I'm going to mute everybody. There we go. And then come back to now and watch all the ripples, all the people and events realign themselves all the way back to now, right, to help us achieve our goals. So hopefully there were no questions on that, but we went from doing some of the clearing work, of course, to starting to reprogram your future here. So we also went through 2 of the advanced forgiveness techniques. Remember, the forgiveness is not about doing it for other people. We do it for ourselves so that we can be more whole and healed and complete and move on. And of course, it all parallels, right? We did single event, then we did timeline for multiple events. The forgiveness is the same way. We're doing single event, I forgive you, me, and then we're doing almost like a timeline forgiveness here, right? So go back to all the origin of my feelings, my thoughts, every level, layer, area, and aspect of my being, go all the way back to this origin, healing every incident and all of its appendages based on this origin. You can see there's like a timeline concept in terms of the language and the verbiage here. So I love this one. Number 2 is probably my favorite for forgiveness and clearing. And then, of course, we did number 3, which is looking down on a stage or looking up from a mountain or on top of a cliff down at a meadow. And we have either a group of people a single person or object come out on stage. That's the short version. But the long version is where we have every group of people come out, right? It's 24 minutes. So it's a long version of you and then mom and then dad and then all your key areas and then wife and family and past girlfriends and past boyfriends and past coworkers and acquaintances and friends as you were kids. And we basically just throw everybody out there on the stage and forgive everybody all at once. So forgiveness number 3 is really great. So I'd encourage you to play around with these. Do number 1, number 2, number 3. Nanette talked about at the beginning of the call being able to go back and just do it kind of with her eyes open. And she's talking to her unconscious mind saying, hey, my little girlfriend, let's just clear this stuff up. Great. I do this 3rd forgiveness with my eyes open. So it's really easy. Look up and to your right, visually picture your stage. Imagine that cord between you and the person on the stage. You just cut the cord and boom, it's done, right? Throw in a little bit of this. I forgive you. I forgive me. I love you. I love me. Let it go. Now it's done. When you cut the cord, and easy peasy, super sweet. So really get the hang of these if you would and if you could, because after a while, all you need to do is breathe deep, and then you can shortcut having even to do an 8-minute audio, and you can just literally start to do it on the go and 10, 15 seconds or even shorter. Just take a few deep breaths, calm down, get that rapport with your unconscious mind, and do the process, let it go. It's almost like we were talking about Tony Robbins and the Q&A, right? Program yourself. You can program the unconscious mind almost just to be on autopilot and just let this stuff go. It just needs the conscious mind to say, hey, do it, right? Because remember, we still need the conscious mind to give direction and permission to release. So I know I went through that real quick. If you have any questions, go ahead and write them down. We're going to stop for just a second before we go into the concept for tonight. Excuse me. All right, so with your questions copied down, the rest of tonight and the first part of session number 4, we're going to focus the rest of our time on dichotomies. So dichotomies are an even more advanced release technique that creates even greater change. So if you think about the course again from the basic to the advanced, first we did individual releases, anger, sadness, fear, guilt, limiting decisions. Then we did advanced release work, right, which let go of, instead of single events, entire gestalts, with timeline work for the first 5 clearings, anger, sadness, fear, guilt, limiting decisions. So we did basic, single events, timeline, gestalts. And now we can do dichotomy work for anger, sadness, fear, guilt, limiting decisions on an even deeper, greater, all-encompassing level, an even higher level. And then once again, the same pattern was there for forgiveness. First, we did forgiveness for a single person. Then we did forgiveness number 2, which is more like a timeline process, which gets more aggressive for a whole gestalt around a person or groups of people. And then, of course, we did the third one, which is releasing it for large groups of people. So we're going to do the same pattern here with dichotomies. Dichotomies are how we gain oneness with the universe. So there are 2 main dichotomies that we collapse. So first we need to understand what a dichotomy is. A dichotomy represents a division or a contrast between 2 things that are or are represented as being imposed or entirely different or opposites. In NLP, we call this a parts or maybe a parts integration. Yin-yang is the easiest example of that, right? Light and dark. And even in the light, there's a little pinch of dark. And even in total darkness, there's still a pinch of light. This represents the conscious and the unconscious mind, right? There's the conscious mind, there's the unconscious mind. They each hold a little piece of the other. There's also us. Conscious mind is a little piece. Unconscious mind is the big piece. And then we have that little bit of us that's wrapped up in the universe. And when we collapse that, this very center spot is called the Wu Ji, or the still point, right? That's the blue-black spot at 6.8 cycles per second, which is perfect truth, right? In Huna, it's the place of total balance. They call it EO, which is a breathing ratio of 7-7-7-7. In, hold, out, hold, the perfect ratio. Excuse me, I'm having an allergy attack tonight, so excuse me. So the first dichotomy in the course that we looked at collapsing was that between the conscious and the unconscious mind, and so if you go back and you remember the house, we collapsed the dichotomy between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. The conscious mind is living in the external world, what it sees. The unconscious mind is where we meditate, right? The rational self, nurturing a critical parent, with the 7-year-old child in the basement. We collapse that dichotomy by clearing our head of the negative self-talk and clearing our body, basically, right, of the emotions, the negative emotions that we feel. When the conscious and the unconscious mind are clear of anger, sadness, fear, guilt, limiting decisions, we've forgiven who we need to forgive, they have total clarity and they become one. Then once we're one, then the second dichotomy is our oneness with the universe or the higher self in the attic, right? And we gain access to that. So the dichotomy work allows us to basically go back to the point of creation, where the perfect stillness is, if we get into all sorts of beliefs here, but if you imagine going back to the Big Bang before the Big Bang happened, that's the Wu G spot, right before masculine and feminine energy formed, before the ripple in the energy that caused the explosion of masculine and feminine energy, which causes the ever-expanding universe. So in that place, we can recreate anything and everything that we want. So we use the terminology that we're going to collapse dichotomies. Okay, we're going to collapse, which means basically, remember that a dichotomy is 180-degree opposites of each other. Two things of each other. Excuse me 1 second. I need to take care of my allergy. Excuse me. Okay, excuse me. Hopefully you didn't hear that. So we can collapse many different things when we do the dichotomy work. The first thing that we can collapse is an emotion. That's number one. So this is one of the pictures from anger, sadness, fear, guilt, and mean decisions. We can literally collapse anger, sadness, fear, guilt, any emotion that we feel or experience, we can collapse it. We just don't know what the opposite is, because the opposite is stored in the unconscious mind. We'll get to that in a second. We can collapse an idea or a concept like money. So we can take what's preventing us from having money, whatever that is, not sure what it is, and we can collapse the opposite of that, but we don't know what it is because it's trapped in the unconscious mind. All this is blank on purpose because it's not fill in the blank. It's we don't know what the opposite of this is, because remember, everything is stored in the unconscious mind. So whatever, like this is, I think, the sadness picture, right? We don't know what's on the other side of sadness for us until the unconscious mind pulls it up. If you try to do this concept consciously, it won't work very well. It's better if you let the unconscious mind bring up the opposite of the dichotomy. So we can do a specific emotion. We can do a concept like money. We can do a value or a word. So if you want to feel success, but you're not feeling success, great. Put success on one side. We're going to go through the process in a second. Put success on one side and see what's preventing you. It will be a very high generalization of what's preventing you from experiencing success. Remember, the unconscious mind is going to bring up whatever the representation is of that. It could be a picture, color, metaphor, story, movie. It could be another word. It could be anything. And then last but not least, you can clear up the dichotomies of you, anything around you specifically, right? So you when you were 5, you when you were 8, you can find out what's preventing you from accepting you there or whatever it is, and clear up dichotomies around you. So just like forgiveness, where we can forgive a person or an inanimate object or a concept, same thing with dichotomies. We can clear up emotions with dichotomies, concepts, words or values, and aspects of you, right, that might be there. So you might say, James, well, how do we do it then? So I want you to, if you have a pen and paper, I want you to draw these two pictures on your pen and paper real quick. Go ahead and draw these down, because this is the Huna representation of the meditation. This is the James Murphy visual representation of the meditation. Use whichever one you like, but please draw them both. Copy them down now real quick if you have a pen and paper. You don't need to color them in, but just go ahead and draw them. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the meditation twice. I'm going to walk you through it once. I'm going to use mine first, and then I'm going to walk you through this one because this one's a little bit more confusing. Okay? So, let's see. Here we go. All right, so a couple simple rules. about collapsing dichotomies. When you go to collapse a dichotomy, the unconscious mind has to find out what the opposite is. So if you're in a place of pain like anger, we don't know what the opposite of anger is. You just have to wait and let your unconscious mind fill that in. If you are positive and you want more money, great. You picture what having money would be on one side. We don't know what the opposite of having money is. So you have to wait until you get into the meditation and you're calm and you're relaxed so that your unconscious mind can pull up what's on the other side. So as we do the meditation, it doesn't matter whether it's the positive aspect or the negative aspect of what the dichotomy is that you're starting with. Okay? So, and whatever you're starting with can be conscious. Is it the positive or is it the negative? It doesn't matter. Just whatever you start with, you have to let your unconscious mind that works in pictures, symbols, metaphors, stories, colors, right? And the representation can be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. You have to let the unconscious mind bring up the opposite, okay? Some of the ways that you can identify when you would use a dichotomy is when you say, well, gee, a part of me wants to and a part of me doesn't, right? So, and then of course, the audio that you're going to get on this is recorded with money on one side of the equation. I figure that's one that everybody would love to have. And you can substitute the opposite of money on the other side for the purposes of what we're doing now. If it's not money, so if it was anger, sadness, fear, guilt, or something else, positive or negative, just tell your unconscious mind to use that instead of money. And you can totally do it because I've been doing it on my other meditations for 3 years. So just pick the opposite of money. If you have money, if you're more in tune to not having money, you could do job, no job. You could do, well, we don't know if it would be no job or job. You have to let your unconscious mind come up with the opposite. But it could be job, no job. It could be relationship, no relationship. It could be love, no love. It could be acceptance, no acceptance. It could be flow, no flow. It can be anything. You can substitute any other representation that you want for your future use. Okay, so let's get into what this means, how we do the meditation. So I'm going to talk this through. Oops, let me move this here. Oh, no. Trying to move this. Hang on. All right. So I'm going to talk through my visual first because I think this one is easier. So if you listen to the meditation from last week, the meditation from last week was basically collapsing the conscious and the unconscious mind. So basically what we did is we just floated all the way above now, all the way out through the universe to the very edge of the universe. That's what this represents, the very edge of the universe where masculine and feminine energy are, right? Where this is ever expanding, moving outward. And so we go to the very edge of the universe where masculine and feminine energy come together and reality is created. And then we just hop on the other side, boop, right into darkness. And that's where the blue-black spot comes in. So we go into the place of truth. We float into the middle of truth. And that's where we just are. We're 100% conscious mind, unconscious mind, and higher self integration happens right here. This is the wonderful, scary place that you never want to come back from because it's just beautiful. So that's what this represents. We're going to take that a step further, and you can close your eyes and follow along with this if you want. But basically, this represents where you are right now. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, relax, tap on your third eye, and imagine you're here looking down. There's a triangle coming out at a 45-degree angle from your head, all the way out, down to the right and to the left of you, or straight out to the right and to the left, kind of at a 45-degree angle. So you're going to be right here, looking down one side or the other, right or left. You just say, hey, unconscious mind. And let's just say we're talking about money. So we're going to collapse the dichotomy around not having money. So you just say, great, what side does it want to come out on? So you picture not having money out here in front of you to your right or to your left. So if you just held your arms straight out in front of you, right, straight out, so they're in front of your head, palms up, and you just move them out to a 45-degree angle, both sides, that's basically what you would be picturing. On one hand over here, you might have money. On the other one, you don't know what's out there yet because you don't know what the unconscious mind is going to pull out. So I'm just going to ask you to float right up above now and float out and float down into where the money is. And notice what you see, hear, and feel with the money. And notice what's good, what's not so good, what's good, bad. And then I'm going to ask you to look over here to the opposite and ask your unconscious mind what that is. What is this over here, right? That's the opposite of money. And what would you see, hear, feel, and think in money? What would you see, hear, feel, and think about what this is over here not having money? And we're just going to do that. And then once we have that awareness, we're just going to say, great, go ahead and float right across over here and go into the opposite. Now that we know what the opposite is, great. And look back towards, notice how it feels here, see here, feel it, think what you think here, notice those. And then go ahead and look back over here to where you have money versus not having money or whatever that is. Maybe it's mom, dad, a bank with being robbed by Jesse James. I don't know what your unconscious mind is going to bring up. But that's what my unconscious mind is brought up, funnily enough, for an example. So, and then notice what you see, hear, feel, and think here that's positive and what's not so positive. And then we're going to ask you to float right back up to here. And now you'll see both sides. You'll see what's empowering about money, and you'll see what's not empowering about money. And then what we're going to do is we're going to float all the way back up through the universe again. Float all the way back, all the way back, all the way back, all the way up to here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take 4 deep breaths in. And every time we take the 4 deep breaths in, we're going to go bring both of these in simultaneously, here and here. We're going to bring them up a quarter of the way on the first breath. And then we're going to bring them up halfway. And then we're going to bring them up a quarter of the way. And then we're going to breathe them right into our chest. So now these 2 different pieces, these 2 different parts of us that wants of it and part of us that doesn't is inside of us. Sorry, I misspoke. And then once both of those parts are in us, you'll visualize them in your chest. Usually that's where I visualize them, in my third eye or my head, my forehead. Once I have both those parts inside of me, then I float up, to here, to the edge of the universe. We'll float up higher and farther back through all the stars, the universe, the galaxies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're going to jump straight over on the other side of the universe, and we're going to float straight into the blue-black spot where conscious, unconscious, and higher self are all one, where there are no dichotomies at all. And I'm going to give you a suggestion that from here, in this place of total truth, like said in Huna the EO, where there are no dichotomies, you can let these 2 opposites that you pulled into your chest and you took up there or into your forehead, you let those 2 dichotomies collapse. You let them just disappear, just dissolve into the oneness of the conscious, unconscious, higher self integration. So you basically just release them, you let it go. This is the integrative process where that disappears. And then we're going to come and float right down here, right to the edge of the universe, not over to it. And then we're just going to ask your unconscious mind to imagine money and no money in perfect unison, in perfect flow. So you want to imagine it like this. A dichotomy where we're out of balance is like maybe 60-40, 70-30, 80-20. 10-90, whatever it is, it's out of balance. So when we collapse it, it's 50-50, it's absolute perfection, or it's 100-100. So when we come down here and it's collapsed, then we're going to project how that dichotomy is from here back into the world the way we want it to be. So like when I collapsed money, my visual was coming right down to here. And I picture the entire universe like one big swirling vortex of money coming to me in the middle. And then I just scooped out a little bit. There's just a little like rudder that was here that just like scooped out a little bit into my bank account all the time. And it flowed in and out and everything. Money just keeps flowing. And I just keep getting my part. And that part just keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger. But I keep flowing it around and around. So my visual imagery now of total perfection with money is it just always flows. It's always ebbing and flowing, and it's always perfect flow, and I get my part of it. It's always coming to me, and my part just always grows and grows, but then it goes back out as well, and it's just perfection. It's perfect flow, and the more I work, the better things happen, and money just flows for me. And it does. So you'll picture, let your unconscious mind picture this new creation of it being perfectly balanced, how you want it to be, so there are no dichotomies, right? There's no imbalance there. And then we flip, boop, straight through to this side, and then just come all the way back down into now, and there you go. So if we go through that process again here, this is the HUNA version. So here, the HUNA version is you would start out right here, and it's very similar, right? You look out in front of you to the right, and you look out in front of you to the left, and you find, the plus side of this and the minus side of this associated into that. Flip over the other side, plus minus association of that, and then you come back up to here. You breathe in both sides with 4 deep breaths, and then they just assume they're already here at the they don't have the floating higher and farther back. So they just float all the way up to the edge of creation. And then you go into this, but this circle here is basically this circle here. But you float up to the edge of creation, and then you float into the blue-black spot, perfect place, the EO of the truth. And then you come back down and you reproject your new dichotomy into the world, so to speak. Here I define the world. They just, I guess here the whole world is the whole sheet of paper. But so it's very similar in its representation. It's the exact same meditation. It's just a different visual. So if you like how this one is, or if you like how this one is, just pick whichever visualization is better for you. That's easier for your unconscious mind to follow along. So I'm going to take a minute and ask you both to just ask everybody to write down any questions that you might have real quick before we move forward. Because I have to speed up if we're going to get through the rest of this. All right, so Q&A. So let's talk about this. Go back 2 stages here. You remember I said we can clear up emotions as dichotomies? Let's talk about the David Hawkins levels of consciousness again. The biggest dichotomies that you can release are right here in the levels of consciousness, even if it's up here, right? So, so we can release all the negative ones, humiliation, blame, despair. Just say, oh, let me let go of regret. What's on the other side of regret? I'm not sure, but let me let go of regret. Let me let go of grief. What's on the other side of grief? I'm not sure. Oh, God's just vengeful. Great. Well, what's the opposite of vengeful, right? So throw that in and see what comes up on the other side and collapse that dichotomy. So you can, if there are a lot of ways to do it, you can do it one at a time based on what your unconscious mind might bring up. Or you could specifically go through the map of consciousness and just start here and say, I'm going to let go of humiliation and see what's on the other side and just work your way up. You could do this for a day. Just go up and release all your dichotomies, even all the way up. Like, what's the opposite of optimism that's preventing you from a dichotomy there? We have dichotomies on all of these places, right? Except maybe bliss and ineffable, which is pure consciousness, which is when every single dichotomy in your life is collapsed. That's how I define that. And you're basically collapsed because you're one with the universe all the time, right? But so that's one way, the first way that you can collapse dichotomies for maximum effectiveness is just to go through and release these major emotions that are here. Okay? In David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, we're going to go more detailed now, right? So these are just major emotions at the highest level. The next thing that you can do would be to clear up general dichotomies, right? So now he has the opposite here. So let's take one here like brilliant versus clever, or believing versus, let's do this one, being versus having. If you go through here and you're like, oh, I have resentment to being, or I have resistance to being, don't just assume that it's having. You'll have to take the being side, because remember I said it could be positive or negative. Just take being and go into your meditation and ask yourself, what's the opposite of being? However, if you're having a problem of having something, say, great. Take having into your meditation and see what comes up as your representation of the opposite. It's not necessarily going to be being. So even though we're giving you this list, doing versus getting, right? Joyful versus pleasure, right? Just versus punishment, or kind versus cruel. They're opposites, yes. These are his dichotomies, but he hasn't integrated release work into this. So if we take this as a general list to start from, you just go through, and if something jumps out at you like, oh, that person disrespected me, great. Put respect on one side or disrespect on one side, and what's on the other side, right? Maybe it's not demeaning, maybe it's a disrespect. But you got to let your unconscious mind come up with the opposite. Whether you start with positive, which would be these rows, or whether it's the negative side, which would be these rows. Okay, so these are just some general dichotomies. So we go from very high level emotional dichotomies to a little bit more specific dichotomies, but they're still general. And then now comes, remember, his levels of consciousness. Each one of these levels of consciousness, so let's take shame, right? If we take shame, Shame has in his book, which book is this one from? I think this is from his Let Go book. These are the dualities of shame: empowering versus disempowering. Or no, I'm sorry, this is negative versus positive, right? So you want to practice forgiveness, great. Put forgiveness up there on one side, see what comes up on the other side. If you're a condemning person, great. Put condemn up on one side and see what comes up on the other side. We don't know. These are just his dichotomies here. But these would be all of the different things you could clear and move through the level of shame. Now you could do shame. Remember, that's back here. When I said the highest level dichotomies, you could just let go of shame, which is a humiliation, right? Same energy level. You could do this. You could do this, which is kind of in between, or you can do specific dichotomies now. So like I said, this is in his book, I believe, Let Go. This one is from his book, Power versus Force. He goes into more specificity in his book, Let Go. His book, Let Go, is 100% all about the bottom half of his levels of consciousness here. Let Go is all about describing each one of these levels and everything that goes with it. So we're just going to go through this real quick, just so you can kind of get a look at it. So what I do with these sometimes is I've already gone through and let go of the big dichotomies of pretty much all the big ones. And I just go through from time to time, just go, what jumps out at me? I don't know. Nothing really jumps out at me. This may be unlovable a little bit. So I would go through and just put unlovable on one side and see what comes up on the other side, right? My daughter had one of her friends come home last week and say, yeah, he always thinks he's such a loser. I don't think so, but he does, right? So that boy would obviously want to put loser on one side if he was doing the dichotomy work, and see what comes up on the other side. What's the opposite of loser? Stud, whatever, awesome sauce, whatever, I don't know. But show what comes up on the other side. So just browse through these real quick. If you want, write down a couple things that did just jump out at you, a couple words. I don't know, stingy jumped out at me there. Rigid jumped out. So maybe I would go through later this week if I had some time and wanted to try out the dichotomy work. So I just go through stingy and do what I say, rigid, right? And put one of those at a time, only one at a time, into the dichotomy and see what comes out. What's the opposite of rigid? I don't know, but we'll have to see. What's the opposite of stingy? I don't know. Maybe it's my cousin. That's who popped in my head, is my cousin, Stingy. So I'd have to release my cousin and Stingy and recreate that new dichotomy. Apathy is the next one. Look, remember I said limiting decisions. You could put a limiting decision up there of I can't versus I won't, right? This one is disempowering. I can't versus I won't, which is I will not. I will is empowerment, right? So go through, hopeless jumped out at me there. So I might do that. Nothing else really does. So I would maybe go through and just do hopeless. Perfect. So if something jumps out at you, write it there. You can do the dichotomy exercise with it. Grief, resistance. That's where my eyes went, right? Where did your eyes go? Go ahead and write down an emotion or two on either side. And we'll click to fear. Great. What jumps out at you in terms of fear? And desire. Go ahead and stubborn jumped out at me there. So look at what jumps out at you. Maybe write down a quick word or two. Something that jumps out. Excellent. And just one or two more here. So we have anger next. Macho jumped out at me. Puffed up chest, right? So I maybe want to let go of those. I used macho earlier. I don't know where that came from. I haven't used that word forever. Maybe prove self. That's one that just jumped out at me as well, right? So I'd want to clear up the dichotomies around those, which would help me to release anger, right? These are the small parts that equal the big part. And pride. So look at what jumps out at you there. Dull jumped out at me. I don't know why dull jumped out at me. Maybe I'm kind of dull. Who knows? Who knows? The unconscious mind. All right, so this is why we collapse dichotomies in a real simple metaphor. We have emotional swings up to the positive. We have emotional swings down to the negative. That is due to our dichotomies. Our highs are high and our lows are low. That means that these dichotomies are way out of balance. Maybe they're 90-10, 80-20. And so we swing and we have these big mood swings up and down emotionally. The more we clear up our dichotomies, the more we get in terms of neutral or balanced, and the easier things get in their flow, the more calm and cool and collected we are, and the quicker and easier and better we manifest things because we don't have such highs and lows. So dichotomies allow us at a high general level all the way down to a specific level, which is what this is. This specific level, this would be the high level, all the way down to the general, then to the specific levels. They help us even out our emotional states mentally and emotionally so that we become more balanced. We can stay in the flow because we're not consciously having big swings up and down and up and down and up and down all the time. And they help us become more balanced. So this is really the big meditation for the week. So remember, just pick one side. Your unconscious mind has to find out what the opposite is. And when you pick the first side, it doesn't matter if it's positive or if it's negative to start. But the unconscious mind has to find what the opposite is. And remember, the unconscious mind is going to bring it up in a picture, symbol, metaphor, story, color, right? I told you what pride or stingy or whatever is on one side. My cousin came up on the other, right? That was a word versus a picture of my cousin. So, and it can be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And a way to know when dichotomies, when the dichotomy clearing process works is if you say, well, part of me wants to and a part of me doesn't. If you're trying to make a decision, well, part of me wants to and a part of me doesn't. Good time to clear up a dichotomy, right? In NLP, we call these parts integrations, and they can be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And like I said, of course, the audio is recorded with money. So if you came up something here, right, which is dull, right? When it says, picture the money on one side, I'm just going to say, picture dull on one side, right? I just say dull instead of money. So you can go ahead and interchange what I'm saying in the audio is for any of these words at all when you go through the process. So there's just going to be 2 audios for the week. I gave you this one last week, actually, so you're not going to get it. But, oh, wait, maybe I did. I'm going to have to double check the audios. I thought I gave you this one last week, but maybe I didn't. So this is just the one where we collapse the conscious and unconscious mind, float out the edge of the universe, float into the blue-black spot, into the perfect place of total integration, conscious, unconscious, and higher self. And then you just come back into now. And then, of course, we have the dichotomy number 2, which is you actually take the opposite, picture one side, float down into that side, look through your own eyes, see the positives, see the negatives of it, flip over to the opposite, whatever the unconscious mind brings up, go into the positive and the negatives of it, float back up to here, see both sides, 4 deep breaths, bring it into your body, and then we float all the way back through the universe, flip over to the other side of consciousness, float into the blue-black spot, where we're at union, oneness, right? This is there. Oops. And come on. And then we float down to the edge of the universe again. We recreate our dichotomy the way we want it to be, so it's in perfect flow. And then we just float all the way back down in the universe, float back down into our chair. And that's it. It's a fun, great emotional clearing technique. I always welcome all the feedback. And of course, like everything, enjoy the emotional release and always be clearing. And remember, of course, to always tell your unconscious mind thank you, because they love it. So next week, I guess, is the Prometheus induction. And we'll go over my suggested monthly and weekly clearing processes, a final review, and where to go from here. So I am going to turn it back over. Remember, I love all Q&A, so please send it on over. I'm going to stop the recording and bring it back to everybody so we can start the Q&A. So